begin this symposium with a special Vice Chancellor's panel, which will see the participation of senior dignitaries that are sitting on the dais. Before I request Professor Ghayur to welcome each of our dignitaries on the dais, I just want to quickly introduce each of the dignitaries who are present. The chair for this session is Justice A.P. Mishra, former Judge, Supreme Court of India and Chairman of the Legal Education Committee. Can we please have a huge round of applause for the chair of this session. Other distinguished speakers who will be gracing us with their presence in this session are Professor N.N. Mitra, former Director, National Law School of India and founding Vice Chancellor of the National Law University, Jodhpur, one of the great scholars of our country. Professor Dr. B.N. Pandey, who is currently the Dean of Admas University, Kolkata, but has also been the Dean and Head of Department of the Department of Law, BHU. May we please have a huge round of applause for Professor Pandey. We have with us, of course, our dear Vice Chancellor of the National Law Institute University, Dr. V. Vijay Kumar, the inspiration and the guiding light behind this entire symposium. Can we please have a huge round of applause for him? We are also honored to host Dr. Manoj Sinha, who is the Director of the Indian Law Institute, Delhi, who has kindly agreed to grace this occasion. Can we please have him? We will begin the inauguration of this symposium with a special Vice Chancellor's panel by first requesting Professor Dr. Ghayur, who is the Faculty Advisor for the National Law Institute University Law Review, the flagship journal of this university, to please share a token of appreciation with each of the dignitaries. Beginning first with Justice A.P. Mishra, may I request Professor to please provide a token of our appreciation to Justice A.P. May I now request Professor Anand to please welcome Professor N.L. Mitra. And then request Professor Anand to kindly welcome Professor B.N. Pandey. Dr. Manoj Sinha, Director, IIM. And finally, Dr. V. Vijay Kumar.
Professor N.N. Mitra, the Vice Chancellor Vijay Kumarji, Professor Pandey, Mr. Manoj Kumar, distinguished members of the faculty, registry, members of staff, and last not the least, dear students. I've been inducted today. Came for a different purpose. But Professor Vijay Kumar told me, he never said it is a seminar going on for 2 days. He said, only address the students. But I am in the jurisdiction of the Vice Chancellor. I have to obey his order, and after obeying his order, I am present here today. I am reminded when I was a young student. And as a student, I already had awe looking to the professors, not for any other reason, a deep respect to them. And I tell you, even in the class, I never tried to look in the eyes of the professor, not only for the reason of respect, but he may not put a question to me which I will not be able to answer it. And today also, when I am in the company after retiring for a long period, I am surprised to be in the midst of distinguished professors of the country. I even today do not look to their eyes. I have the same respect and got education from them being in their company. You are very fortunate. You are having this seminar on a subject on the Constitution itself. Our Constitution is a document, is a philosophy, is a document that speaks about the culture, ethos, and the whole of the country's life, unity, coordination, unity in diversity. If you look to the preamble of the Constitution, only look to the preamble. Every word got equality, justice, liberty and fraternity. It speaks about everything but human want. Though it may not be possible, take that preamble in interpreting, but inner soul, I'll ask all the students to continuously go on looking to the preamble of the Constitution and then interpret the law. You will get the true spirit of the Constitution. The Constitution itself, before coming to the subject itself, why Constitution is required for any country? This is most important. But before that I look, why law? Why law is required? Law is only to curb the human tendency of onslaughting others' rights. Law curbs to remain within the realm of your right. A general tendency of man to go violate others' right, to get for the self-interest. And that is the reason there are 4 yugas, the Krityug, the Treta, Dwapar and Kali Age. In Treta Yuga is the state, the Satyug, there is no law, because nobody violated. They remained within the realm. They only imparted love, cooperation and coordination. The Christian law was not necessary. But gradually man, with the self-interest, went on having self-interest, violating the other's right. Law gradually came into being. You see from any country, if there are more laws, there are more violations. Because we make law to curb that. In a country with a minimum law, you will find people are not violating it. Now, in earlier days, who were dispensing justice? There was no democracy, no dictator's rule. It's the kings. Actually, justice system descended, why call it divinity? Justice is really done by the God dispensing justice. Descended on the king after that. But king also is effective in worldly life. Can a person dispense justice who is affected by his sensory organs? So every king had to counsel, to advise him, a man saintly of a rishi, of a stage, with equanimity and tranquility in his behavior. Dashrath had Vashisht, even Raja Janak had Ashtavakra. Because justice system can only be when you are able to balance all your senses. In each one of us, Kama, Krodha, Moha, Lobha, Matsya, are the 6 elements within us. If we are infected by any one of them, we will not be able to administer justice. I am saying this is important for the students, for the future generation also. Because it's not only reading the letters of the law, but it's reading when you are dispensing, one of you will be bar in the bench, even on academic side you become distinguished professors of the country. You have to have this and the base if you want to truly know the spirit of the Constitution, what is spends about it. Now, you see all right, laws are there. Why Constitution of a country? Country is going on, you should have made law. But as gradually things grew up, the very authority, the highest authority, also got polluted. When the very authority who dispense justice to the country are polluted with somebody to control it. In the democracy, the government is authority. Then the constitution has to come to even curb and curtail the activity of the authority itself. That's why Constitution came into existence. There is no need of Constitution at all. The Constitution came, it laid down, fundamentally laid down limitation even of the authority. You must know, must be aware, three different lists, list 1, list 2, list 3, 7 schedule. It contains the authority, they have to work within that field, they cannot be on it. This is again curbing, there is no need of curbing. The authority is pure, the authority is functioning in accordance with the Constitution itself. But the self-interest there also came. Now, when that came, then somebody has to control it. Judiciary of all the branches is a very important part of functioning in order to control that. So judiciary is given to control, because somebody is to control if the highest authority, not only the government, the executive, the parliament takes the law, the Supreme Court or the High Court can declare ultra vires if it transgresses jurisdiction what contained in the Constitution itself. Constitution laid down, the Constitutional provision is set aside there. So when that power is given to the Constitution, is it not? Judiciary plays a very important part. What is judiciary? You are the first seed or the student who is growing into the judicial fraternity to play a very important aspect of judicial functioning. If you see from this angle, what is important as far as constitutional provisions are concerned, we should speak very highly about it, is the fundamental rights in chapter 3 of the Constitution itself. Of course, every right should be protected. Why it became important? Because now, with man's behavior, even fundamental rights were being taken away by people. So is that a shrine, see how gradually we are deteriorating, that at least this must be protected. This is enforceable force of law. I'm making distinction between what's today, what was earlier. We look to Smritis, look to Shrutis in ancient time. There is no right. There is obligation of the king. Every time spoke about what is the obligation of the authority and what were the obligation authority with the right to the people at all. That's what was the right was. The whole of the concept was obligation, not the right. Today people always speaking about this is my right, this is my right, and that's pretty conflict also. I do not say the right should not be given. That should be protected. The question arises, orientation, thinking about it. I remember Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the first president of India after Constitution coming into force. He was also the chairman of the Constitutional Assembly who debated the Constitution when he came to Allahabad High Court. In one of his speeches, he said, I want to say today that though I was also responsible for making the Constitution of India, I have also played a part. What mistake we have done. He said, we have given, at that time, India was enslaved for centuries. We thought when we are getting liberty, we must contain every conceivable right that any country has given to the citizen. We collected the constitution of the world and picked up the rights which they given, and those rights we contain now in the chapter 3 of the Constitution. He said, why you are saying I have committed mistake? He said, why I am saying so, I mistake committed. Not for the fundamental rights. That we forgot to give. I do not say, do not give right to the people, but only to those who does the corresponding duty. This is what is happening today. which he conceived Dr. Rajendra Prasad within 1 year of becoming president. People always claiming right but not looking whether they are performing their own obligation. Country's coffer depends on the obligation of the citizen, not on the claiming right itself. Right is paid out of the coffer of the obligation of citizens at large. So this is how chapter 4 you become the constitution itself. Those speaks directly principle. I do not know why it is said it is not enforceable. In the future time to come, I think the interpretation I feel is more important because the obligation to the state government, what was said to be earlier times within the studies, obligation of the state, why not enforceable? This needs to be considered for future time to come. I will tell you for another reason. When you say obligation not enforceable, it remains in cold storage. I am giving one small example. In the chapter 4, the directive principle, there is a provision to give free education all over the country below 14 years of age. Remain in the cold storage for more than 40 years. Nothing was done. Then it was thought to bring in the chapter 3. Then ultimately constitutional amendment was to be made, and that was brought in chapter 3. Became enforceable, then only thing was done. So why is it the state has to be forced to do certain things? Why not is the obligation to be performed equally as the right claimed by each individual? That is the position. And also tell you the many things in the constitution still lying, not activated. What was the spirit with which the constitution was made? I am only referring one to passing phases itself. Article 343 conceived Hindi to be the national official language of the country. Article 343 said this will be the official language, but English will continue for a period of 15 years. And 15 years, the subsequent article lays down how commission to be constituted. Commissioners will periodically examine what has been done to improve expansion of Hindi so that gradually we shift over from English to Hindi. But now, after 68 years, it has receded more than what was conceived initially by the Constitution itself. It is required once again reconsideration of you young men for future generation to do and examine it. I am also saying, I am not talking about a political concept of reservation. Reservation itself, one of the very important aspects of the Constitution itself. And it says, it was given in the Constitution that it will continue for a period of 10 years. Before coming on the subject again, I will revert you back, now come back, how this provision was made. I again ask the students and faculty member to more make it available to the students, the debate of the Constitutional Assembly, how this constitutional frame, how to debate. Constitutional Assembly debate, people may be thinking is the Constitution was made for one individual person. It's not correct. Initially, the Constitution made by a person, I'm just forgetting his name, the basics were laid down. The Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel committee was constituted. He made another framework. And finally, but it was thought Dr. Ambedkar was very learned, very professional in all these things, that you rather make a final draft which will be considered by the Constitutional Assembly. He made the draft of the Constitution itself. And that Constitution itself was not final. Each article of the Constitution in the Constitutional Assembly debate, you see, with threadbare considered. What originally was drafted, Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the presiding the Constituent Assembly debate with Dr. Radhakrishnan, Nehru, all stalwart of the country from all fields of life, they participated in the debate. And that draft Ambedkar also modified, changed, and then until made a final. This is how Constitution came into existence. Then coming to the debate on the reservation. This is a very important debate. If you look at the constitutional debate, you find many things. Most members also said, the country has to develop, we have to build up the best men in the country outside itself. But at that time, people of the reserve category were very downtrodden. People were behaving as if they are not human. Very unfortunate. That became so important, basically. They need to uplift them. They need actually to bring them in par with the normal society. That was very evil of us, very bad. Older generation, they felt it. So it became one of the very important aspects. Reservation is very important to bring them in par with it. In the debate, when they ultimately found, you see what was said, they all agreed, make 10 years. But the 10 years they said was, every year government must prepare what they have done. Because upliftment does not mean giving jobs. You have to educate them, bring them in par. They are not different than other citizens. So every year report will be submitted. How much they have invested? What is the budget for that? What has been done for that? But nothing is being done. But however, I'm not coming to the political aspect. The 10 was finalized, but after that, when once again other articles were being considered, some member raised, sir, this 10 year will be extended. It's too short. You'll be surprised if you read the debate. Dr. Ambedkar said no, we will not extend it. You have to complete the intent. You are one of the persons strongly opposed. When you have decided, why should you make it? People, a lot of pressure came, that the body is all right, I am accepting for one reason. No government will extend beyond 10 years except by amending the constitution. That is being done today. You have to amend the constitution, look at them. Unfortunate portion is, after passing the 68, is still, they are not being done what constitution conceived, concentrating the decision, building up. Each thing should have been done by this time, but everybody said, when 10 years come, extend, go on, 10 years come, and using political game. The unfortunate portion is, once again, that has not been done. It is not a day to speak everything on the constitution. Expert is sitting there, so many person, you are enjoying for last 2 days, you enjoy today also. But I want to say only one thing. Be not very fast. Those professionals or lawyers or young men join. You have come to earn money, it is not a profession. This profession is a divine profession. You have to come. I do not say do not earn money. Money will follow you, but you don't follow money. What is important is you must learn morality, ethics as a foundation. If this profession does not contain the tranquility or equality, they can never succeed. We can never give true justice to people at large. And for that, I will tell you, now in the curriculum development committees coming, morality, ethics being included is one of the important aspects of the student studying law in this field. I will only quote what Aristotle said. I will tell you one thing before coming to Aristotle. In fact, in earlier jurisprudence law, people always thought, Aquinas and others, that law without morality is no law. This is, you cannot know, it can't be said to be law at all. That was a deep concept. But 150 years back, the concept, heart and other, the jurists they came, they said no. There is no connection morality and the law. Law is mainly curbing the instinctive violation of the sensory organ to curb that why you morality is a law. And I think there the diversion which has been last 150 years is the cause of unhappiness in spite of law. Nothing is peace in the society at all. This again is a matter for future generation to consider whether return back or not. I'll quote Aristotle. Aristotle said, that morality strives on rationality. Morality strives on rationality, and it is this rationality which controls the irrational part of every human being. If your morality, your irrational part is controlled, then you become a perfect, normal human being. You can dispense with it. Therefore, do not be in a hurry. Be like tortoise. A rabbit is a fast runner, but he lost the battle. His old saying, slow and steady wins the day. Lay good foundation of constitutional law, good foundation to the law itself, win like a tortoise, not like a rabbit. And remember, and say finally what Shakespeare said. Shakespeare said, sweet flower takes time to grow. Sweet flower takes time to grow, but weeds grow in haste. Do not try to be weeds. Thank you very much.
Professor N.N. Mitra, please give his address to the audience.
Because I am the odd man in the galaxy of personality sitting in front. I already told you yesterday that confrontation in the Constitution with me started with Bimal Jalan. Bimal Jalan, a good friend of mine, when we were studying economics earlier years in our life, he discovered that I am in National School and asked me, what are you doing over there? I said, I am in National School, Bangalore, with the mandate of Bar Council of India, trying to build up an institution of excellence. He said, all right, you do it, but please come. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock I want to see you. So I had to go. Bimal Jalan said, country requires law and economics. I find that lawyers are ignorant about economics. And economists are also ignorant about law. So I am now asking you to have a team of researchers who will be financed by World Bank, IMF. You tell me where from, how much money you want. But we want law and economics interface. I started by journal there. And obviously, I open my economics books and try to find out where do I come in. Now generally wherever I sit in my room. On the right hand side, I have 3 books. I keep 3 books constantly by my right hand side. The first book is Time, History of Time. The second book is Bhagavad Gita. And third book, obviously, the Constitution, which many people say is the religion of India, modern religion of India. So when Bimal said me that, I went back and started with my first point. I am a product of partition of Bengal. I've seen the miseries. Spent nights on railway stations. Not fault of me. I was a small kid at that time. Country in 1946 when I moved from the devastated area of Bengal to find succor in Calcutta, we saw the distress of the human being. As a small kid, not fault of me. Maybe perhaps Constitution was not born in there. I was born of the Constitution. So I touched my right hand side. I took Constitution of India. Like Vijay Kumar has given us a Constitution of India tomorrow. So touched my Constitution of India. It was a same type of Constitution of India Vijay which actually was given to me by Ranveer Singh. I took it and opened. Where do I start from? I didn't start from part 3, part 4, part 5. I start from macroeconomic management. Why? Because the previous book on religion, Bhagavad Gita said, who am I? He raised this issue, who am I? Isn't it? Who am I? When Arjuna was tired, he didn't want to listen to it. Then he asked, then who am I? Partha asked, who am I? If you say you are this, you are that, you are that, you are that, you are that, who am I? Bhagavan Vacha, Shoham, Shoham. You are in me. You want to see? Okay, vision. Today this you can see the vision. I said, fast forward. Life can be sometimes afterwards. That can be fast forward. Then I can see you. Yes, tomorrow what is my life? Or backward. Yesterday what was? Today using TV you can do that. Fast forward, backward. Similarly, life also will be like that. So I thought macroeconomic management is my cup of tea. And I started studying Reserve Bank of India. Why? My religion told me that in the Constitution of India, division of power is the key. And here is the religion I have, where it says Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, Trinity of God. God is not one, Trinity. Trinity of God. Okay? Brahma, creator, Vishnu, maintenance, and Shiva, destroyer. Why? Time says every action has got equal and opposite reaction. Every action has got equal and opposite reaction. Partition of India was an action. It has to have equal and opposite reaction. So time is okay, it is autonomous, it's beyond me, a prior. So I started from there because I have to maintain maintenance. And my immediate job was RBI. So I studied RBI. Structure of RBI. Who structured it? Why? What is the reason? What is the macroeconomic situation at that time? What is India today? What is the macroeconomic situation of India today? And on that, ultimately, of course, I told you yesterday that I had to draft a bill called Fiscal Responsibility and Maintenance Bill, and I have to give that to the then President of India, the then Prime Minister of India, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. That's how our journey, my journey with economics started. My journey with economics in National Law School was in Vijay's class. I used to sit down in the last bench. That's it. Because in National Law School, everybody had to be given their subject. The chief person, the person who maintained this whole thing, discipline, Professor Menon, given me absolute freedom. So I had to get the last subject. So I didn't have any opportunity of. So I thought, why not go to Vijay's class? Vijay, there were Trinity at that time, just like Trinity of God. In our constitutional law, there was Trinity. Vijay remember those things, right? And he sits in front of our additional Solicitor General. He knows the Trinity. 3 gods in the constitutional law. So, but I was no, I backbencher. I sit behind them. Friends, that's how I started my confrontation with the Constitution. I scanned at 17 governors of Reserve Bank. Behold, out of 17 governors of Reserve Bank, I found as many as 9 were from IAS. Of them, 3 didn't have any idea of economics, but were governors. I wanted to open this constitution. I wrote all that. If you are interested, you can just see that article published in one of these issues. Macroeconomic management under the Constitution of India and the fiscal responsibility. Because I have not found in India anyone taking a public issue case and contesting with with the Supreme Court saying that at what fault I am an agricultural, what fault people get DA, if you are a government official you get DA. Where is my DA? And you are increasing the price step by step by step by step by step. If I produce, I don't get the market, I think. Market falls down. Because I do not know, market is beyond me. If the agriculture asks, market is beyond me, price stability is not there. So why our lawyers have not gone to the Supreme Court say price stability is a responsibility of this person, this organ, this organ, this organ, this organ. So my question was price stability. Inflation. Which part of the government looks after that? We come to central bank. So I scanned the central bank. You see that the article in details published by ILI, where I said categorized. I said Central Bank of India, is this having character? This is the character of central bank. If it is Bundesbank of Germany, this is the character of Bundesbank. Bank of England, this is the character of Bank of England. If it is Reserve, okay, this is the character of US system. And I found Indian Reserve Bank. Where is it in the Constitution? Macroeconomic management. It's not fiscal responsibility. There are two financial policies of the country. One is called short-term financial policies called fiscal policy. Fiscal policy and fiscal management. Short-term, 5 years. Because our votes are 5 years. Our democracy is for 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. Right? So fiscal. Why fiscal? Because taxation. Why taxation? Because government has to run cost of government. Cost of government. So, detailed structure of the cost of governance raised by the Constitution. I have never seen that some people come and saying, are you taking more tax? How you are distributing money to somebody else? This is banking loan, this loan, that loan. How are you distributing it? Are you taking more tax? In US there were two cases of that. You are taking more tax. That's not necessary. In India nobody said. Nobody said. Nobody asked the government. Anytime. Because I found out Constitution is what metrics of constitutional mechanism of macroeconomic system. I found absolutely word by word 1935 Act. Sir, please excuse me. It was not a great constitution. I have compared 1935 Act and our fiscal management is compared. And I found not even word by word difference. So I said every action has got equal and opposite reaction. If there is over centralization, it is not today. Over centralization started. How come IAS officers, not having anything to do with the macroeconomic systems of management, come to head the central bank? So I structured that, I see that. Now what? Reserve Bank is what? Is it a constitutional organ of the state? No. Fiscal management is definitely there. Where is macroeconomic management, which is called a management of 30 years, 3 decades? 3 decades, 30 years. 30 years you have to study the business cycle. 30 years you have to steer the money. Okay? 30 years you have to see the money. I am astonished to say, Reserve Bank doesn't have. So I had to look from Narasimhan Committee report. In Narasimhan Committee report, this same question was also raised. Now, you have a Reserve Bank, central bank, but you do not have a constitutional central bank. But Finance Commission is a constitutional commission. Reserve Bank is not. If the Reserve Bank governor gives a report, it doesn't come to the people. It doesn't come to the people. because in that case, the whole analysis, it comes under big bound volumes. I do not know whether law schools have it. Big volumes on macroeconomic management of India. All big volumes are coming. Nobody bothers about that. So where is Reserve Bank? Reserve Bank is in the list. List 1. List 1 has a danger. Sorry. Now that's the problem. My problem is you do not give me a posture. My switch is on the leg. So when I am speaking or standing, my switch is on. So you should have said, sit down and speak from here. I would have controlled my time for 10 minutes. Because I know that Kennedy, when he was elected as the president, the first day Kennedy and said, sir, can you please come? He said, I am ready if you are 1 hour. No sir, 1 hour, no fees. Not 1 hour. Is it half an hour come after 2 years? No sir, half an hour will be very positive. If it is for 5 minutes, please come after midnight. Vijay, you should have asked me to sit down here and speak for that. Now, how can I give you a lesson? I have started being long back. Anyway, I have seen Vijay keep in a professor, the professor in the law. So we will continue this type of lateral process of that. But I said, I will finish in 1 minute time. I said fiscal responsibility, whose is the problem? Fiscal responsibility, whose is the problem? Who creates the problem? So we studied IMF guideline on fiscal responsibility, World Bank guideline on fiscal responsibility, and Australia's law on fiscal responsibility, Grant-Rodman Act of US on fiscal responsibility. All these are, he has published. So one can see that. Of course, we are so voracious reader that I did not get one question on that language because constitutional lawyers never ask me any question. This is our constitutional law, which I in the class. We only read fundamental right and directive principle. Why not obligation? Because we are not sure about affiliate square. We are not sure about our original Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwar. Maheshwar has to destroy. Why? Because every action has got opposite reaction. Every good has got a bad. Bad element has to be destroyed. Who will destroy that? Right? Who is going to destroy that bad element? Today you say, look to yourself. You have a duty. I have a duty, I am a agriculturist. I am a small worker, I have a duty. And whole state machinery has a command over me that whole system will destroy. Whole system will destroy. I think Indian constitution is the right line. Though it is quite bulky and quite big, not understandable by the common people. Daily Vijay will try to make small summary of the constitution regarding rights and obligations in brief and see all those that this is everyone should know. Vijay, instead of giving one constitution like that, can you do that and give a copy to every citizen of India? I hope the best. Thank you.
I now invite Professor Pandey to please give his address to the audience. Thank you.
This AP Mishra, Professor Mitra, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Vijay Kumar, Dr. Manoj Sinha, Professor Dixit, other colleagues, and my learned young friends. This is in his presence, I am seeking his permission as I have permanent permission from him. Whenever he addresses Professor Mitra, lot of students, he always says that You are learned young man,
etc., etc.
These words are very, what to say, motivative and inspiring. So I have borrowed that expression and idea to some extent. Friends, I will take not less than 5 minutes because the members of Legal Education Committee of the Bar Council of India, they have done great service to the nation and to the legal education, and personally I satisfy and verify because I am also associated with that. And with the permission of this house, I may add one observation that improving standard of legal education or good legal education is a must for protection and promotion of Constitution of India. Friends, as a student of law, since I am making my observations in the law school, which is headed by a very eminent scholar of constitutional law, Professor Vijay Kumar, so I take the liberty to add that good legal education is very necessary for protection and promotion of the Constitution and constitutional values. Friends, I pick up the last observation of Honorable Justice Mishra, where he emphasized very rightly law and morality, etc., etc. Friends, all of you know the case Navtej Singh Jauhar vs. Union of India, that is unnatural offence, section 377 of IPC, must be knowing, where section 377 has been partly declared unconstitutional. Friends, and before proceeding further, I have to make submission to my young friends and especially to teachers. Friends, good legal education is very necessary, and the lead has to be taken by national universities and other institutions. Other institutions are also doing very well, and some of them they are doing better than many national universities. Not all the national universities, but there are some institutions in India, their performance is far better than many of the national universities. Friends, my submission is that we the law teachers, we should not be confined to head upheld with head. Supreme Court head, Supreme Court upheld, Supreme Court with head. Friends, this is the popular practice of law teaching and constitutional law teaching. I can name a dozen persons who say that I have been teaching constitutional law for the last 60 years, and what do they teach? Supreme Court head, Supreme Court with head, Supreme Court upheld. Friends, get out of that. Get out of that. Unfortunately and unfortunately, this is a forum I am aware of the sanctity and all that. So please get out of that. And friends, why did I make this observation? Friends, this is the message of two gentlemen, Justice A.P. Mishra and N.L. Mishra, Professor N.L. Mitra, that no, standard of legal education is very, very poor. And friends, they are trying their best. They are national asset. Let us follow their message and implement their advice, friends. And if we do not improve the standard of legal education, neither democracy is safe, nor constitution is safe, nor independence of judiciary is safe. Friends, I will take 2 more minutes. What is remarkable about this case, so-called unnatural offence case, Navtej Singh, where section 377 of IPC has been partly declared unconstitutional. Friends, this is the decision of 5-judge bench. 4 judgments. What is remarkable is that all the 4 judges they have quoted extensively about constitutional morality. It was not necessary for them. I have read that judgment 4 times. 4 times. That was it necessary for the judges to rely on constitutional morality?
Time for the other judge.
Yes. And if it was not necessary, they are Supreme Court judges, very eminent judges, they are experienced persons. There must be reasons. There must be reasons. Friends, my second submission is, come out, once again I repeat the first, though it may be unnecessary, come out of this held syndrome. Try to know the inherent meaning. And friends, in the political science, Professor Vijay Kumar, in political science there is not only concept of state, there is concept of deep state. And journalists are using the term deeper state. So we, the law teacher, we should know the deeper meaning of law and judgments, friends, which is not being done by and large. Which is missing? Which is missing? Friends, any important judgment, we should try to know deeper meaning of law. Deeper meaning of law. So when I read the judgment, and there are many judgments, since time is very, very short, and I have promised you that I will not take more than 5 minutes. Whatever I am saying, I am making an appeal, because some of my students are also sitting there, whom I have taught in Banaras Hindu University. There are many. So I am privileged to address them also, to remind them also, because they are holding very important position, and they have to save the career and life of the young law students. Friends, why is it so? Then I will take the help of what is, you are aware of the head notes and catchword. Head notes. So I will adopt the style of head notes. My first submission is that essence of constitution is constitutionalism. Essence of constitution is constitutionalism. And friends, there are many books on constitutionalism. Most important monograph has been published by a Columbia professor, Henkel. And in that book, beauty of that book is some minimum ingredients of constitutionalism. Friends, my second submission is, I am just summarizing that without any explanation, though each issue requires detailed elaboration. Friends, just you read 4 or 5 judgments. Each one of you is aware of state of Bihar versus Kameshwar Singh case, the famous first Jamidari abolition decision of the Supreme Court. Friends, that was more important than Keswanand Bharti case in 1950. Landmark decision, where for the first time Supreme Court declared Jamidari Abolition and Bihar Land Reforms Act unconstitutional, then constitutional First Amendment, Second Amendment, etc., etc. That is a matter of great detail. You will find in any book. So that was the decision. Friends, do you know that in that case, Dr. Ambedkar himself appeared before the Supreme Court as an advocate. Dr. Ambedkar appeared on behalf of many Jamidas. And what was his argument? He argued that there is a spirit of the Constitution that must be adopted, implemented by the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, his argument of spirit of Constitution was expressly rejected by the Supreme Court. Expressly rejected. Friends, then I will just quote briefly. Then second case, all of you know, this Keswanand Bharti case, then Privy Purse case, then DC Badhwa case, the famous judgment, where Supreme Court had that no, continuous promulgation of the ordinance into ordinance, ordinance into ordinance for decades. It is fraud on the Constitution. And friends, what is most important in this Badhwa case? Supreme Court has that it is violation of core of constitutional scheme. This is the main argument. In Badhwa case, that is landmark decision on ordinance promulgation power by the president. Most important argument to me is they have said that it is violation of core of constitutional scheme. Then similarly the argument that is another very famous case, Iyer Coelho versus State of Tamil Nadu. Friends, Supreme Court have highlighted that there are two types of values. Two types of values. They have reminded us means we the citizens of India, not only litigant before the Supreme Court. Supreme Court through judgment, they are not simply adjudicate the dispute between two parties, friends. There is important message to the we the people of India, and so here also in this case, Supreme Court has, and all the judges have said, there are two types of values in the Constitution. Then in similar way, in M. Nagaraj, it's also very important case. And friends, lastly, in this National Judicial Commission case, very important observations have been made. But I like one observation of Justice Lokur, where he has highlighted that independence of judiciary is not physical but metaphysical. Independence of judiciary is not only physical but metaphysical. Independence of judiciary is not like plasticine that it can be molded in any way one likes. Friends, my last submission is, if you look into the larger context, especially underdeveloped countries or third world countries, they have also written constitution. And take the instance of Brazil, Pakistan. What happened? Did we discuss? And friends, what has happened today or last year in Pakistan and Brazil? If we do not become conscious, friends, our situation and situation of Indian Constitution, the day is not far off. And I am very disappointed. I am also disappointed after reading few judgments of the Supreme Court, but happy also that in some of the judgments of the Supreme Court which have been recently delivered, since September 2018, friends, after September 2018, 9 important judgments of far-reaching importance have been delivered by the Supreme Court. Each judgment is important. And the message, in some cases the message is very disturbing to a law student, but there is also a ray of hope. You find that there is some symptom of creativity. And we have to follow the creativity, highlight the creativity, and friends, this National Law School, hardly in the country there can be a better forum than Bhopal National Law University. And when it is headed by no less a person than Professor Vijay Kumar, he is a very serious and senior scholar of law. So exploit his presence, utilize his presence, and he is a very capable and competent man. He can organize any program. Please assist him. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Pandey, for your powerful observations. May I now invite Dr. Manoj Sinha to please address the audience.
Honorable Justice A.P. Misra, Professor Anil Mitra, Professor B.N. Pandey, Professor Vijay Kumar, Professor Dikshit, and Professor Puneet, Guru, and all the students. It was a pleasant surprise yesterday. Let me just first answer what Apurva is thinking, whether sir will take another 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I promise you are wrong, I will take only 2 to 3 minutes, not more. So quickly, but I was very happy that you asked on the separation of powers in the Constitution seminar by Indian Foundation and National Law School. I want to start with quickly on this drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. and both wife husband were very important person, which shaped the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and subsequently it has become part of the Indian Constitution, more or less. People say, but it's not. But some of the individuals participated in the drafting of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Particularly Hansa Mehta, she participated. P.C. Neogi, he participated in the Nuclear Commission. So there are a lot of Indians also played very important role in the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Wife husband means Frank Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt. So Eleanor Roosevelt, like Roosevelt, he focused on the 4 essential freedoms, and what he said, these are very fundamental. The first is freedom of speech and expression. Second, he taught of freedom to worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And unfortunately, by the time Elena was appointed as the chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights, he was not president. He died in 12th April 1945, and Henry Truman has appointed her as the member of the Commission on Human Rights and subsequently chairperson. The entire focus, these 4 essential freedoms, they reflected in the debate of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, particularly civil and political rights and economic, social and cultural rights. The contribution of the Hansa Mehta is very important, and the time has come that we must know and we must acknowledge her significant contribution. The very first article, and she always believed in the gender equality or women empowerment. The Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is word now, all human beings. But initially at the draft stage, it was all man or born free. So the word was man, not human being. She insisted, this has to be removed. And then word has the all human being. And that has been acknowledged recently also by the Secretary General of the United Nations in the 70 years of the celebration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Well, we are happy and we are lucky that separation of power is not so strict in Indian sense, because every time even the ordinance is adopted, is challenged the High Court. Legislation is adopted, the Parliament challenges the court. Court also takes note of that. And there are 2-3 cases. I mean, because of the Supreme Court of India, executive and legislature both acted. If I take you back to the Visakha judgment. So what we have the Domestic Violence and Sexual Harassment Act, because of the Visakha judgment, court asked, we are party of the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination of All Forms Against Women. You have not done anything till you adopt the law. So we see the interference, some kind of, it's not a strict sense separation of power. The one case which I feel it's very much related with the Justice J.S. Verma, and it's very important, how Indian judiciary, and sir had said, and I will take note of the Professor Pandey, he had also head Supreme Court, so I'll take 1 or 2 cases of High Court also, not of the Supreme Court. So what happened in the time of ratification of International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights on 10th April 1979, Government of India executive took a decision that Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the ICCPR is not applicable to India. In India is like we made a reservation. So Article 9, Paragraph 5 says that in case of unlawful detention, victim has a right to seek compensation. And this particular, so executive has made this intention clear to world. Article 9, Paragraph 5, Article 1 of the International Covenant are not applicable to India because we don't have any similar law at the national level, so we have a reservation. You can't compel us to implement Article 9, Paragraph 5. However, in the judgment of Nilavati Vera versus State of Odisha, the Supreme Court not only identified and said that we have an obligation under Article 9, Paragraph 5 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to pay compensation to victims and VC. So court has not bothered about what executive has done, what reservation court has. Court is not worried, and court in fact also in the Visakha had said that any treaty which is consistent with the constitutional code, we have no problem in implementation. Last case which I'll quickly sum up with the Nomgyal Dolgar versus Ministry of External Affairs, and this was decided by Delhi High Court, and in fact Justice Muralidhar had a lot of very important judgment where constitutional principles, fundamental rights are protected. Where the first time, by the judgment of the Nomgyal Dolgar versus Ministry of External Affairs, it's a passport issue on a Tibet national is involved. Quickly to sum up, And all Tibetans in India, though they have been living in 1959, they have given an identity number. They have not opted for the citizenship. Each has an identity number which helps them to all the benefits, travel abroad also. So a girl, Nomgyal, she born on the 13th April 1986, she applied for the passport. Instead of putting her identity number, she has clicked nationality India, which Ministry of External Affairs objected and said, you put kindly your identity number. They said, she said, I'm born on the 1986. This matter went to the High Court and finally court said we are not looking into, we look into the Citizenship Act. And the unamended Citizenship Act, the first time in 1987 it was amended. So unamended Act, it has not focused on the status, it's on the person whose birth has taken place in India. They are entitled to become Indian citizens. And court interpreted in that manner. Court has not looked into the other arrangement of the executive. And court said according to this, and then 30,000 Tibetans got passed, Indian citizenship on this basis. And same matter again to the Karnataka High Court. And then in 2013, right to go to the Tibetan people were given. So we see a lot of developments there. I am very happy that India Foundation has taken initiative. And this exercise will continue. Maybe next time we will go to Patna, Guru is here, then JNU also. So with this, I wish all the best. Thank you very much.
Great pleasure to invite Professor V. Vijay Kumar, the Vice Chancellor of the host institution, to please give his address and also thank the other dignitaries on the dais.
Mr. Justice J.P. Mishra, Professor Mitra, Professor Pandey and Professor Manoj. The young and energetic Additional Solicitor General of India, Vikramjit Banerjee, Mr. Katoj, the underrepresentatives from the India Foundation, Professor Dikshit, the youngest faculty of NLA Bhopal, Professors Ravi Alam, Tapal Mohanty, Mukesh and UP Singh, my other learned colleagues present here, colleagues from other institutions, the representatives from Bar Council of India, the alumni, and my dear young friends. All of you have to make a commitment. Today we could speak something authoritatively even against the decisions of the court. It is because we had a wonderful set of students who would never allow us to get out of the class without clarifying the doubts. And one such student, every time I go to the class, constitutional class, I used to tell them that we are today what we are, not because of the books that we read, not because of the articles we read, but because of the devils sitting in the class. And they make us work more, not only in the classroom, outside. And one such person who also immensely interacted with us, even after the constitutional law courses were complete, is the present Additional Solicitor General, Vikramjit. Please stand up so that the youngsters can see. Yeah? Right, having said that, Manoj was very nice in completing it in 3 minutes. So I'll take his 7 minutes and my 10 minutes to say something. I would take a clue from Professor Mitra, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, and specifically the separation of powers doctrine. I would like to be very brief because I got a large amount of information on this. I don't want to use this opportunity. The very objective or the foundation of the concept of separation of powers is to see that no one branch, no particular branch is able to become all powerful and then destroy the very nice relation among the three branches, which in law we call it as checks and balances. And therefore, the object of the separation of powers, the concept of separation of powers, is to create these three branches and also make them work together so that no one becomes all powerful. We have two examples with reference to the form of government and separation of powers. One is India, the other one is Sri Lanka. We had a meeting and the Sri Lankan representatives, including the judges, said, we like the parliamentary form of government like India because there is a check. I told him we always liked a presidential form of government like that you have. So let us change our position and see. But that is not the answer. The answer is, in both these constitutions, actual working of the constitution, the concept of checks and balances did not function effectively. That is the reason. That is the reason why the president became all powerful, and that is the reason why here the prime minister, as a representative of the elected populace in this country, becomes all powerful at the center, and the chief ministers in the states. If only that the concept of separation of powers and checks and balances work together, possibly the rights and liberties, the benefits, the economic implications that Professor Mitra has been saying, all of them would have been possibly realized if only this was made functional. Did we make it functional? I have to very quickly make a mention about this. At the commencement of the Constitution, I will not get into that. In a few decisions like INRI Delhi Laws Act, a 7-judge bench of the Supreme Court, I don't want to use the term hell in the presence of Pandey, it said, right, now you cannot complain, so it is not the right language to use, that the Indian Constitution does not provide for strict separation of powers. I just want the young minds sitting here, particularly the students from other institutions, I don't know what is meant by separation of powers. Now the Supreme Court added one more term, strict separation of powers. What is this? In some other place they use the term, we don't have rigid separation of powers like that of America. So I went to the American Constitution. It's a very brief constitution, read it 2 times, 3 times. Nowhere it is called as rigid or separation of powers. The term separation of powers has never been used in the American Constitution at all. So therefore, trying to find that meaning or the phrase in the Indian Constitution is obnoxious in my view. Only thing is you have to read and understand the text in that particular sense, and in INRI Delhi Laws Act, the Supreme Court was not able to appreciate this. We can understand because that was the time the Constitution came into force. Maybe the printed copies were not available to the judges, they did not possibly go through. That is the only explanation I can give, with due respect to those judges. Now, they say once you sing the song, it is easier for the judges to follow, because the concept of stare decisis, precedent, lower bench, you have to follow the higher bench decision. Almost till 1973, none of the Supreme Court benches ever said that we have the concept of separation of powers or checks and balances. And all of a sudden, and that too during the times of emergency, when we read the judgment, please keep in mind, look at the framework. When exactly was the judgment delivered? If it was delivered during a crisis like this, we have to add color to the judgment as well. But here, for the first time, during the times of emergency, in Keshwanda Bharati, 4 judges of the 13 judges made a mention that separation of powers is a basic feature of the Constitution. 23 years we have not said anything. Now 4 judges out of 13 come out and say that the separation of powers is a basic function, basic feature of the Constitution, and they said they were seeking to provide, because they also refer to the American Constitution, they were seeking to provide ways and means within the Constitution to tame that political power, and make it purposive. At the same time, they were also envisaging the techniques through which power would be a check to others. Other powers, thereby maintaining a constitutional equilibrium in between elections. This is what the judges said in case of the Bharati. And subsequently followed by that, Minerva Mills, they used another phrase. Under our Constitution, we have no rigid separation of powers. Right? The term used is rigid. But there is a broad demarcation, though, having regard to the complex nature of governmental functions, certain degree of overlapping is inevitable. That overlapping is what we call it as checks and balances, right? However, the court did not clarify. I want the end minds, please, when you read the judgment, the judges throw certain phrases like this. You have to understand whether they really meant something or whether it is only a typo, right? Therefore, the judges, though they use the term, they did not clarify the distinction between the broad demarcation which they mentioned and the inevitable overlap. If only they have mentioned that, possibly it is easier for us to understand what these two phrases really meant, right? I have other judgments speaking about Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan. I would like to just read only one sentence, that the essence of the rule of law, see, the essence of rule of law, which inter alia requires the exercise of powers by the government, whether it be the legislature or the executive or any other authority, be conditioned by the constitution and the laws. They used different ways of saying that we should. And then comes the bank, L. Chandrakumar versus Union of India. Once again, only one sentence I am going to read. The observations of Justice Scheller and Grover, who in the same decision observed, there is ample evidence in the constitution itself. See how many years? This Chandrakumar case was decided in 1997. So 47 years after the commencement of the constitution, the judges were able to find ample evidence about the existence of this doctrine of separation of powers. Right? Ample evidence in the constitution itself to indicate that it creates a system of checks and balances by reasons of which powers are so distributed that none of the three organs, carefully please listen to this, none of the three organs it sets up can become so predominant as to disable the others from exercising and discharging powers and functions entrusted to them. So you can see that the Supreme Court, the graph is constantly increasing in its height, and then slowly but steadily the Supreme Court followed many more. I would like to just mention two more and then resume my seat. We are already delayed. The Constitution Bench, again, in state of Tamil Nadu versus state of Kerala. This was decided very recently. Recently means not in 2018, in 2014. I would like to read two different parts of this judgment. Once again, I want the young minds to apply their minds and see whether the court, what it said is right or wrong, and where to find the substance within the framework of the Constitution. It said, even without express provisions of the separation of powers, see the language, even without express provision of the separation of powers, let me tell you, I have not come across a constitution where they use the title separation of powers and then divided the powers among the three branches. I have not seen that. So you have to read the provisions and understand in that context. And this is what the court was saying. Even without express provision of the separation of powers, the doctrine of separation of powers is an entrenched principle in the Constitution of India. The doctrine of separation of powers informs the Indian constitutional structure, and it is an essential constituent of rule of law. It is not simply an independent element, it is an essential element of rule of law as well. In other words, the doctrine of separation of powers, though not expressly engrafted in the Constitution, its sweep, operation and visibility are apparent from the scheme of the Indian Constitution. Constitution has made demarcation without drawing formal lines between the three organs, so on and so forth. In the second place, the separation of powers between three organs, legislature, executive and judiciary, is also nothing but a consequence of principle of equality enshrined in article. I couldn't understand this. Maybe I am not well versed as a student of law, but this is what the court said, and this is what I want to bring into the young minds. Please read this carefully. In this state of Tamil Nadu versus state of Kerala, the court says separation of powers between three organs, legislature, executive and judiciary, is also nothing but a consequence of principle of equality enshrined in Article 14 of the Constitution. I do not appreciate it, but still. Right? Second, accordingly, breach of separation of judicial power may amount to negation of equality under Article 14. I can't understand. right? Equality is for individuals or institutions, I do not know. And when they try to overdo it, and sometimes they also miss the bus. So you have the example saying, for the first time, the court was able to appreciate it very beautifully for the first time, that even without the express provisions, separation of powers is automatically ingrained, but they used it to say what was ingrained to substantiate their own powers. So the court is all powerful, so he cannot tell us what we should do and what we should not. And finally, a reference was already made, I.R. Coelho versus State of Tamil Nadu. A 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court held that the principle of constitutionalism is now a legal principle which requires control over the exercise of governmental power to ensure that it does not destroy the democratic principles upon which it is based. These democratic principles include the protection of fundamental rights. The principle of constitutionalism advocates a checks and balance model of the separation of powers. It requires the diffusion of powers, necessitating different independent centers of decision making. Therefore, one can appreciate that what is already present, it took almost 50 years for us to understand that semblance of doctrine of separation of powers is present in the Constitution. And if we don't support, do some research, publish and tell them that this far and no further, that each and every branch has to work, that within the confines of the Constitution, whether it is a court, whether it is a legislature, or whether it is a president. Of course, president is not at all in the race, right? And what is vested in Article 53, the Supreme Court successfully divested of all the powers of the president and the governors. Therefore, we need to rejuvenate the concept of separation of powers and checks and balances to maintain the democratic values in this country. And I hope this symposium is only the beginning, and possibly in the coming years we will have theme-based discussions so that it is much more focused and we are able to deliberate better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Vijay Kumar, for such an insightful address to end the valedictory session. The Constitutional Law Symposium is an initiative by India Foundation and NLIU Bhopal to create the first such academic forum in Central India for an important discussion on constitutional issues facing the country. This is the first of 5 such symposiums that we propose to hold over the next 5 years in collaboration with the university. And to cement this partnership, we will now sign an MOU between India Foundation and NLIU Bhopal in the presence of the distinguished dignitaries on the stage. May I now invite Major General Dhruv Katoch, Director, India Foundation, to please join us on stage for the signing of the MOU before we end the inaugural session. Students to please get copies of the MOU for the Vice Chancellor of NLIU Bhopal and Major General Dhruv Katoch. A pen from our dignitaries with which they have signed the MOU so that this tradition of organizing symposiums continues for the next 5 years. Can we have a huge round of applause for this important collaboration? And I now request Karthika, you may collect your pen from the Honorable Vice Chancellor. We now come to the end of the inaugural session for the symposium. Please remain seated while the dignitaries leave the dais. We will take a 10-minute quick break before we resume with the first plenary session on faith and Indian Constitution. Can we please have a huge round of applause for all the dignitaries? May I request Avni and Divya to please guide the dignitaries of the dais.